Welcome back to another episode of Digital Voices. This is part 3 of Epstein's Islands. And in this podcast, we're going to explore the intricate web of the U.S. Virgin Islands legal system and how its shortcomings allowed Jeffrey Epstein to evade justice for so long, and how the current system struggles to hold powerful individuals accountable. And the U.S. Virgin Islands is a territory of the United States that has a unique legal system that incorporates both U.S. federal law and local statutes. The U.S. Virgin Islands legal system is complex and unique within its framework that presents both opportunities and challenges for the pursuit of justice. The case of Jeffrey Epstein has exposed some of the shortcomings of the system, particularly in the ability to hold powerful individuals accountable for their crimes. While reforms are underway, it remains to be seen whether the U.S. Virgin Islands justice system will be able to address these issues and provide justice for victims. The U.S. Virgin Islands, located in the Caribbean Sea, was acquired by the United States in 1917. The territory has a population of approximately 107,000 people, and its legal system is based on the Revised Organic Act of 1954. This act grants the territory a degree of autonomy, but it also imposes certain limitations. The USVI is subject to the U.S. Constitution and federal law, but it also has its own local statutes and courts. This unique legal framework can create confusion and complexity, especially in cases involving federal crimes and high-profile individuals. The U.S. Virgin Islands legal system is comprised of several different levels of courts, including the Territorial Court, the Superior Court, and the Supreme Court of the Virgin Islands. The Territorial Court has jurisdiction over minor offenses and civil cases, while the Superior Court handles more serious criminal cases and civil matters. The Supreme Court of the U.S. Virgin Islands is the highest court in the territory and has jurisdiction over appeals from the lower courts. One of the key challenges facing the U.S. Virgin Islands legal system is the lack of resources and expertise. The territory has a relatively small population and limited resources, which can make it extremely difficult to investigate and prosecute complex cases. In the case of Jeffrey Epstein, who had significant wealth and resources, he was able to hire a team of high-profile lawyers who were familiar with the USVI legal system and enabled him to exploit its weaknesses. Epstein was able to sexually abuse and traffic minors on his private island, Little St. James, in the U.S. Virgin Islands for years. But it was not until public pressure mounted that authorities took action. Another challenge of the U.S. Virgin Islands legal system is the perceived lack of dependence. The territory's governor and attorney general are appointed by the U.S. president, which can create conflicts of interest and undermine the impartiality of the justice system. In Epstein's case, there were allegations that the U.S. Virgin Islands attorney general had a personal relationship with one of Epstein's attorneys. This raised concerns about the fairness of the proceedings. Furthermore, the U.S. Virgin Island legal system has been criticized for its handling of sexual assault and trafficking cases. The territory has one of the highest rates of reported rape in the United States, and advocates argue that the justice system often fails to adequately investigate and prosecute these crimes. In Epstein's case, some victims accused the USVI authorities of ignoring their complaints and failing to take action until public pressure mounted. In recent years, the U.S. Virgin Islands legal system has attempted to address some of these shortcomings by implementing reforms such as increasing funding for law enforcement and improving victim services, but the territory has also established a specialized court to handle sexual assault and domestic violence cases. This court's been praised for its victim-centered approach and for providing a supportive environment for survivors. Additionally, the U.S. Virgin Islands has passed several laws aimed at strengthening the justice system's response to sexual violence and trafficking. For example, the territory's anti-trafficking law provides for increased penalties for traffickers and increased protections for victims. The Virgin Islands has also passed laws requiring law enforcement officers to undergo specialized training on sexual assault and trafficking. The USVI is a beautiful territory, but this dark side is often overlooked. The lack of justice, bribery within the system, and the absence of laws setting time limits for cases have contributed to a justice system that fails its citizens, especially victims seeking justice. This lack of justice reinforces an air of impunity for wrongdoers, creating a cycle of corruption and inequality that could be intentionally designed by people of influence within the U.S. Virgin Islands, and likely is. Bribery is a significant issue in the U.S. Virgin Islands, particularly within this justice system. It's common for individuals to pay off judges, prosecutors, and other court officials to receive favorable rulings or have their cases dropped entirely. This practice has eroded the public's confidence in the justice system and has created a culture of impunity. Many victims of crimes and their families feel helpless and powerless, knowing that their cases will not receive a fair hearing due to bribery and corruption. Additionally, the lack of time limits for cases to be resolved or for the Office of Disciplinary Counsel to rule on complaints is a significant issue in the U.S. Virgin Islands. This has led to a backlog of cases that languish in the courts for years with no resolution in sight. Victims of crimes and their families are left in a constant state of limbo, wondering when or if they will ever receive justice. This lack of closure can be emotionally and mentally devastating, exasperating the trauma of the original crime. The absence of time limits for cases can also lead to intentional delays, allowing for influential individuals to manipulate the system for their benefit. For example, if a wealthy or powerful individual is facing charges, they can use their influence to drag out the case indefinitely. The absence of time limits for cases can also lead to intentional delays, allowing influential individuals to manipulate the system for their benefit. For example, if a wealthy person or individual is facing charges, they can use their influence to drag out the case indefinitely, knowing that there is no time limit for it to be resolved. This allows them to continue their lives as usual while their victims suffer without closure. Moreover, the lack of justice in the U.S. Virgin Islands is intentionally designed by people of influence to maintain their power and privilege. By keeping the justice system inefficient and corrupt, they can avoid being held accountable for their actions. This reinforces a culture of impunity where individuals have power and influence and are above the law. This perpetuates a cycle of corruption and inequality, making it nearly impossible for ordinary citizens to receive justice. The lack of justice in the USVI is a significant issue that needs to be addressed urgently. Bribery within the system and the absence of laws setting time limits for cases have contributed to a justice system that fails its citizens, especially victims seeking justice. This lack of justice reinforces an air of impunity for wrongdoers, creating a cycle of corruption and inequality that could be intentionally designed by people of influence in the USVI. It's time for the USVI to address these issues and create a justice system that is fair, efficient, and accountable to all its citizens. Having one part-time investigator to handle ODC complaints or Office of Disciplinary Counsel complaints underscores how this is perhaps intentionally designed by people of influence. The U.S. Virgin Islands is also a significant point for drug smuggling, which has contributed to the legal corruption within the territory as well. Drug smuggling is a lucrative industry that often involves corrupt practices, and the USVI's proximity to drug trafficking routes has made it vulnerable to corruption and other criminal activities. The drug trade is a high-stakes business, and smugglers are willing to pay large sums of money to avoid detection and prosecution. This has created opportunities for corrupt officials to turn a blind eye to drug trafficking activities in exchange for bribes and other incentives. The corruption within the justice system and law enforcement agencies in the USVI has made it easier for drug smugglers to operate in the territory, further perpetuating the cycle of corruption. The money generated from drug trafficking often finds its way to the local economy, providing a significant source of income for businesses and individuals who may have close ties to those in power. This can make it challenging to hold individuals accountable for their actions, as they may be protected by influential people within this small community. The prevalence of drug trafficking in the U.S. Virgin Islands has also led to an increase in violent crimes, further exacerbating the problem of legal corruption. Drug gangs vying for territory and control, violent clashes have become more frequent, and corrupt officials have been willing to turn a blind eye to this violence to protect their interest. Drug trafficking has created a culture of fear within the U.S. Virgin Islands, making it difficult for individuals to speak out against corruption and other criminal activities. Those who do may face retaliation from those in power, further perpetuating the cycle of corruption and allowing criminal activities to go unchecked. Drug smuggling has contributed significantly to legal corruption within the U.S. Virgin Islands. The lucrative nature of the drug trade has provided opportunities for corrupt officials to turn a blind eye to drug trafficking activities in exchange for bribes and other incentives. The money generated from drug trafficking has also created a significant source of income for businesses and individuals with close ties to those in power, making it challenging to hold individuals accountable for their actions. The prevalence of drug trafficking has also led to an increase in violent crime, creating a culture of fear that makes it difficult for individuals to speak out against corruption and other criminal activities. It is crucial that this cycle that is currently happening in the U.S. Virgin Islands be addressed, and that these issues that create the issues, these root causes, be addressed within the U.S. Virgin Island system. That's the only way that the U.S. Virgin Islands justice system is going to become fair, efficient, and accountable to all of its citizens. However, it's not by happenstance that the self-governing entity of the Virgin Islands has these loopholes, allowing for what is quite evidently a routine that is done over and over and over again, where people act with impunity and these cases are stalled out for decades. So you might ask yourself, who are these people of influence? Well, one group of people of influence in the U.S. Virgin Islands is the political elite. These are individuals who hold positions of power within the government, such as senators, representatives, and other elected officials. These individuals have the authority to shape policies, create laws, and allocate funds, making them some of the most influential people in the territory. They also have the power to influence public opinion, and their endorsements or criticisms of certain initiatives can sway public opinion and shape the territory's political landscape. Another group of people with influence in the U.S. Virgin Islands is the business elite. These are individuals who own or manage major companies or organizations within the territory. They have significant economic power, and their decisions can have a profound impact on the U.S. Virgin Islands economy and job market. They also have the resources to influence political campaigns and lobby for certain policies that benefit their businesses. In addition to the political and business elite, there's also influential individuals in the U.S. Virgin Islands who hold significant cultural power. These individuals who are leaders within their respective communities and have the ability to shape cultural norms and values. Religious leaders, community activists, and artists are examples of some of the individuals who hold cultural power and can influence the U.S. Virgin Islands social and cultural landscape. But it's important to note that while these groups hold significant influence in the U.S. Virgin Islands, they're not the only ones who shape the territory's policies and norms. Ordinary citizens have a voice in the U.S. Virgin Islands democracy, and their participation in the political process can influence the decisions made by those in power. The people of influence in the U.S. Virgin Islands are the political, business, and cultural elite who shape the territory's policies, the laws, and the cultural norms. It's their decisions that have a significant impact on the lives of the U.S. Virgin Island residents. And it's essential to ensure that their actions are transparent and accountable. It's important to remember that ordinary citizens also have a voice in the U.S. Virgin Islands democracy, and their participation in the political process can help shape this territory's future. The U.S. Virgin Islands has been plagued by corruption for years, with widespread reports of bribery, fraud, and other illicit activities. Removing corruption from the U.S. Virgin Islands is an essential step towards creating a just and fair society, but it requires a concerted effort from both the U.S. mainland and the U.S. Virgin Islands government. One crucial step in removing corruption from the U.S. Virgin Islands is greater involvement from the U.S. mainland. While the USVI is a U.S. territory, it is often overlooked by policymakers in Washington who prioritize issues affecting the mainland. However, the U.S. mainland has a vested interest in ensuring that the U.S. Virgin Islands is free of corruption, as it affects the entire U.S. justice system. The U.S. mainland can help by providing additional resources to the U.S. Virgin Islands, including funding for anti-corruption initiatives and training for law enforcement officials. However, you need to remove the corruption first. The mainland can also hold the U.S. Virgin Island government accountable for taking action against corruption by enforcing laws and regulations that promote transparency and accountability. Another crucial aspect of removing corruption from the U.S. Virgin Islands is ensuring that the U.S. Virgin Islands government fulfills its constitutional obligation to preserve the right to a speedy, fair, non-biased justice within the USVI courts. This means ensuring that cases are heard in a timely manner and that all parties are treated fairly and impartially. It also means taking steps to remove any corruption from the judicial system, such as by implementing transparent processes for judicial appointments and ensuring that judges and court officials are held accountable for any corrupt practices. The U.S. Virgin Island government can also take steps to remove corruption from its own ranks by implementing anti-corruption measures such as transparency in government contracting, whistleblowing protections, and training for public officials on ethics and anti-corruption measures. It can also create an independent anti-corruption commission to investigate allegations of corruption and hold those found guilty accountable for their actions. Removing corruption from the U.S. Virgin Islands is essential for creating a just and fair society. It requires a concerted effort from both the U.S. mainland and the U.S. Virgin Island government, including greater resources, accountability, transparency, and anti-corruption measures. As a U.S. territory, the U.S. Virgin Islands falls underneath the constitutional obligation to preserve the right to a speedy, fair, non-biased justice within the U.S. Virgin Island courts. It is crucial that all stakeholders work together to address corruption in the U.S. Virgin Islands and create a system that promotes transparency, accountability, and justice for all.